Hi, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well this morning or whenever it is that you are watching this lesson. Today, we are continuing our discussion on Microsoft Excel. I've talked to you guys before about how Microsoft Excel is one of my favorite Microsoft applications. There's just so many cool things that you can do with it. The functions and the formulas inside of Microsoft Excel just make so many things so much easier to do. Today, specifically, we are going to be performing a little bit of an experiment. More specifically, it's a dice rolling experiment. So some things that you will need for today. One, you're going to need Microsoft Excel. You're going to need a blank worksheet open in Microsoft Excel. And then you will also need a dice. Okay. Now, if you don't know where to get a dice, maybe look for your game cabinet. Like if maybe you have Monopoly somewhere, or for me, I have this little game of Farkle. And inside of Farkle, I got out just one dice is all you need. Okay, so see if you can find a dice from a box of Monopoly that you have around the house, or Farkle, or some other game that requires a dice to use. Now, if you don't have a dice, don't panic. It's not a big deal. I will show you an online thing that you can use that will work just as well. But for me personally, I think it's more fun just to roll a dice, you know. It feels good rolling off the fingers and just seeing what it lands on. So for me personally, I prefer a physical dice, but if you would prefer to use an online dice, I'll show you one that you can use here in a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into the objectives of this lesson. Okay, we have two objectives. Our first objective is to record data from an experiment into an Excel spreadsheet. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this dice and we're going to roll it 30 times. And each time we roll it, we're going to record the result into an Excel spreadsheet to form kind of our data set. Okay. Our second objective is to create visual representations of data into tables and graphs. Okay, because if we just put a bunch of numbers in an Excel spreadsheet, that doesn't really help us too much, or it doesn't help other people to interpret that data at all. So we're going to use that data then and interpret it and make it in a more presentable way for other people to see. Okay? So after you're done with this experiment, there's three things that you should be able to say that you can do. The first, you should be able to say, I can enter data into an Excel spreadsheet. Okay? You're just entering numbers into a data set. The second thing that you should be able to say is that I can organize my data into a table, something that's a little bit more presentable for people to be able to understand your data better. And then the third thing you should be able to say is that I can display the data from my table as a graph, something that people can visually see to interpret your data a little bit better. Okay? Some key vocabulary that we need to understand before we get started. Now, some of these we've talked about already. Data. Data are facts and statistics collected together for reference or analysis. Basically, data is just a bunch of numbers that have to do with a certain topic. Okay? A table then is a set of facts or figures that are systematically displayed in columns and rows. You guys have created tables before a lot in your math classes and your science classes. We're going to do it today in Excel as well. And then also a bar graph. You guys learned about bar graphs in your elementary math classes, I think in maybe like 5th grade or 4th grade. A bar graph is a diagram in which the numerical values of variables are represented by the height or length of lines or rectangles of equal width. Okay. And then the last thing I want to talk about before we get started are functions. We've previously learned about sum functions already, right? So we learned about the sum function, right? The sum function adds up a lot of numbers in a column above the sum. The average function takes the average then of those numbers. The min and max find the minimum and the maximum values of those numbers. And then the count function counts how many numbers there are in the data set. Okay, so those are 5 of the functions that we've already learned. Today I'm going to introduce to you a new function called the COUNTIF function. Now that kind of looks like the count function, but instead of counting all of the numbers in your data set, it gets a little bit more specific. Okay, the COUNTIF function counts the number of times a specific number shows up in the data set. So let's say you have a list of numbers, and you want to count the number of times that the number 13 shows up in your data set. you can use this COUNTIF function and it will count. It will go through your entire list and count how many times the number 13 shows up. Pretty cool, right? All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead then and get started. So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead, if you haven't already, open up a blank Excel spreadsheet. Okay. And the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to save it. So in the upper left corner, you're going to go to File and Save As. Go to your personal OneDrive. Click on your 6th grade folder. And you're going to go into Computer Science. And you're going to name this, let's go ahead and name this Dice Rolling Activity. Okay, and then you're going to go ahead and click Save. Okay, now every time we do something, it should, since it's saved to your OneDrive, it should automatically save. Okay, now let's go ahead. Before we start rolling, we want to set up our data set. So in A1, you're going to click right here in cell A1, and I want you to type the word data. Okay. Now, I want us to kind of organize an area, a table of sorts, so that we can actually enter our data into. So we need to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make data here the title of my data table. So I want my data table to be 2 columns in wide, and it needs to be, the height needs to be enough cells that we can fit at least 30 or more data entries into it. So let's just make sure we go all the way down. Let's say we go down to 30. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a table. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here in your, make sure you're on your Home tab. Right here, this little button right here, there's a drop down. We've talked about these borders before. You're going to go ahead and click All Borders. What this does is it sets up some borders right here that we can enter in our different data values into. And now since data is going to be our table title, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right here to this Merge and Center button. And I'm going to click that. And now it's the title of my data. This basically what this does is this just gives us an area to fit all of our data into. Every time we roll our dice, we're going to put a number into this data table. Okay. Now we have our data table set up here. What we're going to do is I want to have some sort of a counter that tells me as I enter numbers in, the counter is going to tell me how many times I've rolled. Okay, so we can actually use a function that we learned about previously that can count all of the different numbers in my data table here. You guys remember what that function is? It's one of the ones that I just talked about on one of the previous slides. That is the count function, right? So let's say we go ahead and go to D1, and we're going to enter in the words total rolls, okay? Because what I want this function to do is count the total number of times that I've rolled so far. It just helps me to keep track of it. Then in cell E1, right next to it, you're going to go ahead and type your equal sign. Remember, before each function, you have to type an equal, and then you're going to type in the word count, and then a parentheses. What you need to do now is highlight your entire data set. So you're going to go ahead and go from A1 over to B30, and this highlights your entire data set. See how it's got the blue dashed lines kind of all around it? This shows that my data set is highlighted. And then all you have to do is do another parentheses to close it off and hit enter. And you can see right now there's a 0 because I haven't entered in a single number yet. Okay, if I were to enter in let's say a 2 and hit enter, you can now see that my total rolls has gone up to 1. Okay, it's showing that I've rolled once. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go through a couple of rolls with you just to kind of show what we're doing. Okay, so go ahead and I've got my dice handy here. I'm going to roll it 1 time. Okay, so I'm going to roll it once. The first number that came up, if you can see, is a 1. So my first number I'm going to put in is a 1. And you can see automatically my total rolls number has increased to 1. Pretty cool, right? Okay. Now, I'm going to roll it again. Remember, my goal is to roll a total of 30 times. So let's go ahead and roll it again and see what we get. My second result comes up as a 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 2 right in there. And again, you can see the total rolls has increased. Let me go ahead and roll it one more time, just as an example. I roll it again. The number this time is a 5. Okay, so I'll go ahead and put a 5 in here. Okay, and my total rolls number has increased to 3. Okay, so what I want you guys to do, if you want, you can even use these first 3 numbers in your data set, but I want you to go ahead and roll your dice 30 times. Now, I did say before, if you don't have a physical dice, that's okay. What you're going to do, if you don't have a physical dice, you're going to go to a website that is listed on Canvas. Okay, I have it listed. It's linked there. You can just click it. It's www.random.org/dice. What that does is it brings up this website right here. Okay, random.org. Okay, it says this form allows you to roll virtual dice. The randomness comes from atmospheric noise, which for many purposes is better than the pseudo-random number algorithms typically used in computer programs. Now you'll notice this drop-down box says roll 2 virtual dice. We're only rolling 1 dice in this experiment. So what I want you to do is click on this. If you are using this, click on this and make sure that's at 1. Okay, and then all you have to do to roll it is you just click roll dice, and it gives you a random side of the dice, and it came up as a 2. If you want to roll it again, you just click roll again, and it looks like you got 2 again. If we roll again, now we have a 5. Okay, so each time you want to roll, you just click roll again, but make sure every time you roll, you go back to your spreadsheet and you enter it into your data set. Okay, so what I'm going to have you do, go ahead and pause the video right now and conduct your experiment 30 times, and then come back and we'll continue with the video. Alright, so hopefully you have now completed it 30 times. I'm going to go ahead and go to this sheet in which I've already completed it 30 times. Okay, so I've already done my experiment 30 times, so my data is filled out here. And actually, some of you might have, yours might look a little bit different because I think I might have an extra row here. Let me go back real quick. Yeah, so I told you to just do 30. So let me delete this. This is a 3. And I'll put a 3 right up here. Okay, so yours should look something like this. Your numbers aren't going to be the same as mine, obviously, right? Because you didn't roll the same as I did, right? Okay, so, oh, you know what? I forgot to do my number counter as well. So this total rolls, and then I'm going to do equals count, and then we're going to highlight our data set and hit enter. So you can see I have 30 rolls. This is what you should have in yours as well. Yours should say that you have 30 rolls. Okay, now we have now organized the data from our experiment into a data set. But if somebody were to come and look at this, it doesn't really mean much to them because it just looks like a bunch of numbers, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to organize this data into a table that's a little bit more readable, a little bit more presentable, that gives people a little bit more information. Okay, so we're going to have 2 columns in our table. The first column, we're going to title it number. Okay, what this is this is going to specify the number that shows on the dice. Okay, below this column, we're going to list all of the different numbers that could be rolled on a dice. Well, this is a 6-sided dice, right? So there's 6 numbers that can be rolled. A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now what I would really recommend is instead of typing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, type out the word. And the reason for this is it's going to make creating a graph later on a little bit easier. Excel is going to get a little less confused if you type in the words. So go ahead and type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay? Now, in the second column here, you're going to go to E3, and we're going to type in our next title. We're going to title this Times Rolled. This is going to tell us the number of times that each of these numbers was rolled. Okay. Now you can see that the times rolled kind of bleeds into the next cell. I don't like it when they bleed, so I like to double click this little separator here, because what that's going to do is it's going to expand the cell, expand that column so that it fits the entire word in, so it doesn't overlap. Okay. Now, we want to know how many times in this first cell right here, we want to know how many times a 1 was rolled in our experiment. Now, we could go in and count individually how many times a 1 was rolled. It wouldn't be that hard with only 30 rolls. But there's another function that I want to show you guys today that's going to make this a lot easier. And that's that COUNTIF function. Okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and type your equal to sign. Remember, our functions always start with equal to. And then I want you to type in COUNTIF and then start your parentheses. Okay? Now if you look at this little tool tip here, after COUNTIF, inside the parentheses, the first thing it says is range. The range basically wants you to specify the range of cells that it's going to search in. Well, we want it to search our entire data set here, so we're going to highlight our entire data set. And you'll notice once I highlight the entire data set, what it does is it enters it in for you, A1 to B30. Now you're going to separate that with a comma. The next thing is it wants you to do is write the criteria. The criteria is the specific number that you're trying to search for. In this case, we're searching for the number 1. So you're going to type in 1, and that does need to be the number 1. Okay? When I hit enter, then watch what happens. It comes up as the number 8. Okay? If you look in our function bar up here, our function is still showing, but when you hit enter, then it changes to the number 8. Okay? If we go into this data set, we can actually physically count just to make sure it's correct, right? So in mine, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 ones. So it looks like it's correct, okay? So in this particular data set, it's pretty easy just to count, but the reason we're using this function is because what if you have a data set that includes 100 numbers or maybe 1,000 numbers? Are you really going to go through and count all the different ones in 1,000 numbers? That would be really hard to do. This makes it a lot easier to just use the Excel function to just go ahead and find all of the instances of a 1 for you. Okay? It makes it nice and simple. It's one of the reasons why I love Excel so much. These functions make things so much easier. Okay? Next, what we're going to do is we're just going to do the exact same thing for each of these numbers. So the next number is 2. So we're going to go ahead and enter in our equals COUNTIF. Then we're going to highlight our data set, put a comma, and now instead of a 1, we're going to enter in the number 2. Close off your parentheses and hit enter. For me, there were 5 2s. Now again, for you, don't freak out if your numbers are different. Remember, for you, your numbers are going to be different than mine. So maybe for 1, you only have like 3, but then for 2, you have 7. That's totally okay. Remember, your numbers are going to be different than mine. Okay, for 3, we're going to do the same thing, equals COUNTIF, highlight your data set, okay, put a comma, and now we're looking for 3, and I just happen to have 3 3s. For 4, you're going to do the same thing, equals COUNTIF, highlight your data set, put a comma, and now we're searching for 4. Now do the same thing for 5, equals COUNTIF, highlight your data set, separate it with a comma, and now we're searching for the number 5. And then the last thing we're doing is 6, so equals COUNTIF, highlight your data set, put a comma, and then put the number 6. Okay? So, if you need more time, go ahead and pause the video. I'll wait while you go ahead and finish putting in your functions. Okay? What I want to do now, okay, is I want to make this table a little prettier. Okay, so because right now it's just kind of plain, right? I want to make this a little bit better looking. Now with this data set, I mean, I showed you how to make it do separators, right? We could come in, we could make our own borders, things like that. We could use this fill button right here to fill it in with a different color. But there's actually a way to make it nice and easy. If you go here, you highlight your data table, and then come right here. You should be on the Home tab. If you come right here and say click Format as Table, there's a whole bunch of options that you can use to format your table, which makes it nice and easy, right? All these different styles. So let's just say we pick one. Let's go medium, and I'll click this. I like blue. Blue's my favorite color, so I'll go ahead and click this. Okay, and it brings this up. Where's the data for your table? We already have it highlighted, so then we're going to just click OK. We do want to click this box to show that our table has headers, because our headers are number and times rolled, right? And then we'll hit OK. Okay. And what it does is it creates a nice little table for us with number and times rolled as our headers. Okay, it's pretty nice. Now, just to make sure that all these numbers add up to 30, because remember, all these numbers should add up to 30. We rolled it 30 times. We're going to use another function. What function can we use to make sure that all these numbers add up to 30? It's that function that we learned about yesterday, the sum function, right? So we're going to go ahead and hit equals sum with parentheses, and we're going to highlight all these numbers that we want to add up. Okay, and we can see it adds up to 30. Now, what would happen if this number wasn't 30? Like, what if this number was, say, 25? How is that possible when it says right here that the total number of rolls is 30? Well, if this number is different than this number that you have up here, what that probably means is that when you're in here entering in your values for these functions, you probably didn't highlight your entire data set. So like maybe for 6, what if you only highlighted this? Now it only shows us that as there only being one instance is 6, because you didn't highlight your entire data set. See how only this part is blue? So if this number doesn't match up with this number, you want to make sure to go into each of your functions and make sure that you highlighted your entire data set for each of your functions. Okay, so it should match up 30 and 30. We're good to go here. Okay, so now we have all of our data kind of organized into this nice, easy to read table, right? You can see 1 is the most rolled number that I rolled. I got an 8. I don't know what it is for you. Maybe for you, the 5, you rolled like 9 times. Or maybe all your numbers are pretty even. Okay? But this gives us kind of a nice visualization of all of our numbers. Maybe some got rolled more, some got rolled less, but it gives us a nice visual of what got rolled the most. Okay? Last thing I want to do then is I want to take this table here and I want to display it as a graph. Okay, more specifically, we're going to display it as a bar graph. Okay, so creating a bar graph is nice and easy. All you need to do is you need to highlight your table that you have now. Okay, and now you're going to go up. We're going to change tabs. You're going to click on the Insert tab right here. Okay, once you click on the Insert tab, right here is a Charts section. If you click on this Recommended Charts, it brings up this dialog box. Okay, the first recommended, it has a couple of recommended here, right? It's got a bar here, it's got a horizontal bar graph here, it's got a pie chart here. What I want you to do is click on All Charts. If you click on All Charts, it shows you all of the different options that you could do. There's a column. Okay, this is actually what we're going to use. We're going to use a column chart, which is basically just a bar graph. Okay, there's a line graph. There's a pie chart, right? So if you wanted to display your data as a pie chart, you could do that. There's a horizontal bar graph, right? So if you want to display it horizontally, there's that. There's something called a histogram, which you're going to learn about later on in math class this year. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and use column. Okay, and what we're going to do is I want you to go ahead and click on this top right option right here, and then click OK. What that does is it creates a nice little bar graph for you with your data in it. Now, the problem with this bar graph is it has a title that says times rolled. It doesn't really say, though, what's being rolled, right? What does this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 even mean? What are we measuring here? So what we need to do is we actually need to kind of adjust our title here to be more specific about what this experiment was. And we need to add axis headers as well. So we need to show what our x-axis is referring to and what our y-axis is referring to. So to change our title, all you need to do is click on your title. See how it kind of highlights it there? And then it brings up a cursor. You can highlight this. And we're going to change this title to Dice Rolling Activity. Okay. Next, I want you to double click any white part here and then come up. You should be in the Chart Design tab here. And I want you to click Add Chart Element. What this does is it gives you a bunch of different things that you can add to your chart. What we're going to do is we're going to add axis titles. And what we do, you'll notice both of these are not selected. See how if we click on axis here, both of these are shaded in because we have both of these selected. Neither of these are selected currently. So what I want to do is I want to select both of these. So if we click on primary horizontal, what it does is it brings up an axis title right here. If we go back up to add chart element again, click on axis titles again, and then click on primary vertical, now it adds in a vertical axis title. Okay, so now we can enter in titles. What should our title be for this axis? Well, if you notice, along this we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. What this is the number that was rolled on the dice. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to, let's say this is number shown on dice. Okay, just so it's nice and clear so nobody gets confused about what that is. For the vertical axis, okay, this is the number of times that number was rolled. So I'm going to change this to number of times rolled. Okay, so now you can see we have we've got labels for both of our axes. Okay, we've got the number of shown on the dice, and you can see this gives us a visual representation of how many times 1 was rolled, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. Now, one more thing that you can do is you can actually come in here. If you double click on this, if we're in our chart design, if you kind of expand this button right here, you'll see right here there's a whole bunch of chart styles. Okay, if you click on this button right here, it shows you all of the different styles that Excel kind of has as a preset for you to choose from, right? So, and if you just hover over it, you can see your chart kind of change. I'm going to let you go ahead and pick one of these that you think looks best. For me, I think this one looks kind of cool, right? It's got like a nice black background. The numbers or the letters are nice and white, and then the bars are blue. I think this looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this one. You can choose whatever one that you want though. Okay, so go ahead and choose a graph layout that you think looks good. And then it'll go ahead and it'll change for you. Okay. All right, so we're pretty much done. So we've conducted our experiment. We have 30 different trials in our data table here. We have our total number of rolls right here. We've got our table that shows the results, and then we've got a bar graph that also displays our results in a slightly different way, a little bit more visually. Okay. Now, one thing that's cool in each of our functions here, since we highlighted the entire data set, one thing that's kind of cool is that let's say I wanted to add more trials to my data set. Like let's say instead of doing this 30 times, let's say I wanted to do it another 10 times. Okay, so let me go ahead and take my dice. I'm going to roll it again. And I got a 3. If I enter in a 3, I want you to look what happens first right here to number 3, and then also to the number 3 right here in our bar graph. So I'm going to enter in a 3 and look to see what happens when I click enter. You can see it automatically updates. Okay, the 3 increased to 4 right here, and then my line increased again. So let me delete that and show you again. Okay, So let's say I enter in a 6, right? Look to see what happens. Our 6 is going to automatically update in our bar graph. See how it went up? And then the 6 here automatically increased, and you can see now the sum is 31 because now I did 31 rolls. So that's kind of cool, okay? Anytime you enter in more data, your table and your graph are going to automatically update. That's pretty cool, right? It's one of the reasons why I like Excel so much, okay? So this kind of concludes our lesson for today. If we go back to our I can statements, think about our I can statements that we learned about earlier, or that we talked about earlier. There was 3 of them. The first one, I can conduct an experiment and enter those into an Excel spreadsheet. That's what we did right here. You can do that, right? Our second I can was that I can take that data and organize it into a table. And just like that, we did that. The third I can statement then was I can take the data that was in the table and put it into a nice, easy to read bar graph. And just like that, we did that right here. So hopefully your spreadsheet looks like mine. It probably looks a little bit different, right? Your numbers are different. Maybe you chose a different format for your table or your graph. But for the most part, it should look something like this. If you guys do have any questions over anything, feel free to shoot me an email. Let me know. Also, if there's anything that you miss, and if you would like to look at like a step-by-step instructions from something that you just didn't quite pick up, I do have the instruction sheet once again posted on Canvas. When you guys are all done, if you need to go back and look at anything from the video, feel free to do that. But when you're all done with this, you've got it saved, you're going to go ahead and upload it to Canvas, and I will be able to check it there. Okay, again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.